Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In the following collection of stories, we delve into 4 more unsettling and uncanny real-life accounts of eerie Ouija board encounters. Such stories are often kept private due to their traumatic and perplexing nature and the chilling imprint they leave on those who experience them. However, as for the stories of those brave enough to share them, they have the power to challenge our most basic beliefs about reality. Prison panic. During the summer months of the year 2000, an unusual terror-filled incident took place in Santa Clara County Jail, involving a group of incarcerated inmates. This group, which consisted of Hispanic gang members in their 20s, decided to handcraft a Ouija board from the backside of a Scrabble board. They drew symbols of the sun, moon and alphabet, and a teardrop-shaped planchette was created from a scrap of cardboard. On a subsequent evening, a handful of inmates gathered around the handmade board in a dimly lit bathroom, with the only source of illumination trickling in from underneath the door. They invoked Satan, and eventually the spirit of a female made its presence known to them. She claimed to be a murder victim, and when queried about her death, the response was, "Investigate." The game took on a more terrifying turn the next time the inmates gathered in the gloomy bathroom to play. An uncanny presence was felt among them, and when they questioned its identity, the cardboard planchette began spinning erratically on the board of its own accord. This unexpected occurrence spooked the inmates, and they fled the room. On returning, one of the men began to act oddly. He described feeling cold and enlarged, and was plagued by an inexplicable rage. His voice deepened unnaturally, a development that initially led his counterparts to suspect he was acting. However, as his odd behaviour continued into the 3rd day, the inmates became convinced he was possessed. Fearful that they too were overtaken by a malevolent spirit, they tore up the board and disposed of it. Chaos ensued on the morning of August 5th, when correctional officers were alerted by terrifying screams from the cells. Upon investigating, they discovered the inmates in a state of distress, claiming to be possessed. The behaviour was unprecedented for the jail staff. According to a spokesperson from the jail, seasoned inmates typically don't exhibit fear, as it signifies vulnerability. However, these men were so visibly terrified that jail authorities felt compelled to seek assistance from a Catholic priest. Upon his arrival, the priest performed a blessing on all 29 inmates and sprinkled holy water in their cells. This seemed to pacify most of the men, but the 3 who were most affected by the fear of possession needed additional counselling over the next 2 days. Eventually, their fears subsided and they were able to sleep through the night. The experience was so unsettling that they pledged never to tamper with the Ouija board again. No respect. Priding herself as an unwavering atheist materialist, Jennifer found it amusing when her best friend unveiled a Ouija board during their sophomore year of high school. Jennifer took it upon herself to make it clear that she saw the entire concept as superstitious hogwash. As the board was being set up, she mocked and ridiculed the notion of spirits, making it abundantly clear that she found the very idea of the phenomenon ludicrous. Her friend, who held a more serious view of the Ouija board, attempted to instruct Jennifer on the rules, such as uttering "break" before removing your hands from the planchette, emphasising the importance of showing respect. Jennifer, however, dismissed this advice with laughter. When they finally began and their hands were on the planchette, Jennifer was taken aback, as it moved without any exertion on her part. Nevertheless, she promptly rationalised this phenomenon as either her friend's doings or an effect of the shared subconscious. As the evening unfolded, peculiar messages kept appearing, which her friend ascribed to spiritual communications. Still dismissive, Jennifer was in the middle of making snide remarks about the supposed spirit when an unexpected late-night phone call startled the teenage girls. Upon her friend answering the call, she began to utter hello, but quickly stopped when she heard only the sound of a dial tone. Jennifer grabbed the phone from her friend with the intention to turn off the ringer. However, in shock, she almost let it slip from her hands when she discovered that the ringer was already off. It wasn't until several weeks later when the girls considered another Ouija board session. The board had been brought to Jennifer's place, but they'd never gotten around to using it that night. Jennifer had assumed that her friend had taken it back home. However, she was jolted awake that night by a violent rustling next to her bed. Initially attributing it to her cat's playfulness with her floor-placed stuffed toys, she switched on her lamp to shush the cat, only to find a still pile of toys and pillows and her cat asleep at the foot of her bed. Her hand trembling, she rummaged through the pile until she discovered the Ouija board at the bottom. The remainder of the year was a difficult period for Jennifer. She experienced multiple car accidents and uncharacteristic emotions. These included episodes of intense depression, a constant feeling of impending doom, and bouts of anger and hatred towards others. It was only several years later, after reading about spiritualism, that Jennifer began attributing her string of misfortunes and dark phases to the Ouija board. Despite her newfound learnings, it took her a while to accept that a mere piece of cardboard bought for $20 from Target could harbour such potential for harm. However, as she delved deeper into her studies and engaged with others who'd had comparable experiences, she gradually acknowledged the spiritual assault she had suffered, tracing its origins back to the night she showed, quote, no respect to the Ouija board. The haunted apartment. In 1991, Cassie relocated to an apartment in Reno, situated next to a funeral home. A favoured pastime among her and her friends was to dabble with a Ouija board, treating it as a harmless amusement rather than anything serious. However, a series of unnerving incidents soon unfolded. Disturbing noises, including scratching, scraping and moaning, pervaded the living room and kitchen. To add to the unease, Cassie's 5-year-old daughter would position herself at the edge of her bed at 3 a.m. nightly, screaming until Cassie was roused from her sleep. Initially, Cassie dismissed these occurrences as her daughter adjusting to a new environment, and the noises being the product of outdated heating systems and aging pipes, rather than linking them to the Ouija board or any paranormal phenomena. This theory, however, was about to be challenged, and to an unsettling degree. Cassie had to leave town for a brief period and called upon some friends to house-sit and look after her pets. Upon her return, however, her friends were nowhere to be found. Once she finally managed to contact them, they expressed their terror and resentment towards her for not disclosing that her house was haunted. They recounted an experience where a dark, shadowy figure emerged beside their bed, provoking them to flee the apartment in fear, never to return. They explicitly told Cassie that they had no intentions of coming back. Following this episode, the unsettling noises within the walls and ceilings amplified, persisting every night from midnight until 5 a.m. At a friend's suggestion, Cassie reached out to a local Catholic priest who performed a blessing on the apartment using holy water. He advised her to dispose of the Ouija board, suggesting that she had inadvertently drawn in a spirit from the adjacent funeral parlour. Later attempts to destroy the board were unsuccessful, leading them to discard it in a dumpster several miles away. Shortly thereafter, Cassie decided to leave the apartment. She has not been in touch with the subsequent tenants and prefers not to know if any odd or disturbing events continue to transpire there. However, one thing she is certain of is that she will never engage with a Ouija board again. The Devil's Gaze. At around the age of 9, David and his siblings spent an evening casually engaging with a Ouija board. They posed trivial questions to the board, but soon lost interest due to the lack of responses or noteworthy occurrences, subsequently deciding to turn in for the night. Sometime later, David awoke, shivering in the cold. He glanced at his clock and noted the time: midnight. Lying on his back, he stared at the ceiling, hoping to drift back to sleep. However, instead of gazing at a plain, uninteresting surface, he found himself confronted with a horrifying figure. To David, it was the spitting image of the devil. The entity, the colour of coagulated blood, had no visible legs, but flaunted a muscular upper body. Its face resembled a skull with skin tautly pulled over it, giving the impression that it could tear at any moment. Its eyes were like two radiant flames, and a pair of horns jutted from its forehead. The creature grinned menacingly at David, its skin further contorting around its skeletal features. Paralysed with fear, David shut his eyes, fervently hoping and praying for the dreadful apparition to vanish, until he eventually succumbed to a deep sleep. The next morning, David found himself in a completely normal bedroom. However, he noticed that his digital clock had mysteriously halted at exactly 12 a.m. It wasn't blinking, as it would have been in the case of a power outage. It had just stopped. His wristwatch had similarly frozen at the same time. Even though David recounted this event a decade after it had taken place, the vividness of the memory remained as potent as the night it had transpired. Since then, he too has refrained from any interaction with a Ouija board.